Dear colleague and friends, I'm happy to see so many of you gathered here today. I hope everything has been good for you so far. And it's now time for keynotes. And the first keynote is a dear friend of mine, a colleague, and I can't say mentor because then it's too, he gets stuck up. But Dag Avango, I welcome you to the floor, and you are going to talk about legacies of the past in contested futures, insights from the Arctic. I leave the floor to you, and he deserves an applause.
Thank you very much, Roine, and thank you for asking me to give a keynote lecture. I'm really honored to do that. So the aim of this talk is to discuss the role of industrial heritage in competing future visions in regions that are undergoing rapid change, with examples primarily from the Arctic region, and in particular for this part of the Arctic where we are right now. In research and in public debates on climate and sustainability, the polar regions have a special position and has had that in recent decades. And there are several reasons for this, and most of them are related to the profound changes that are happening in the Arctic, and which I will get back to in a moment. And these changes have resulted in a number of competing visions about the future, visions that are related to the interests of different actors who are engaged here. And these future visions are almost always anyway, related to different perceptions about the past. Perceptions that are also connected to the physical remains from the past, not least remains of industry. And this presentation will present some insights from research projects exploring the role of material legacies of industry in the building of the future in the Arctic. And I will just briefly show a slide with some of these research projects. They have been ongoing since the beginning of the 2000s, funded by different Swedish funding agencies, Mistra, Nordforsk, Science Council, Formas, and also ongoing projects like the Goal Conflicts in the Green Transition, funded by Vinnova, and Conflict and Cooperation, which is a research program I presented earlier this week funded by the Tercentenary Fund of the Swedish National Bank. So what do I do? What do I mean when I speak about the Arctic? Because the Arctic is a vast region that encompasses the northernmost parts of our globe. And what is included in the concept of the Arctic has been defined in different ways by researchers from different disciplines and indeed also political actors. And one definition is based on the Arctic Circle, which is located some 200 kilometers south of us. Another is the 10-degree isotherm. That means the area where the average temperature never exceeds 10 degrees in July, and that area begins to the north of us. One is based on the tree line, another on the boundary for permafrost. But in socially oriented research about the Arctic, the most commonly used definition is that of the AMAP, the Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program, which combines physical, geographical, and human geographical conditions. And that gives us a region where roughly 4 million people is living and where activities of great local, regional, and global importance take place. So, changes in the Arctic, what are they? Well, the most important one that we know of is, of course, climate change. The Arctic is warming at a significantly faster rate than the rest of the world. The climate change rate is roughly 3 to 4 times faster in the Arctic region than in other parts of the world. There's also a faster warming in the Antarctic, but the Arctic is exceptional in this sense. And that, of course, has impacts on the environment in the Arctic. And a really important part of that is the melting of large masses of inland ice, land ice that is located on land and that melts and flows into the sea water. That happens on archipelagos such as Svalbard, where 2/3 of the land is covered by inland ice, and indeed on Greenland, but also here in northern Fennoscandinavia, northern Finland, and Sweden and Norway. And the melting glaciers in the Arctic has effects in the rest of the world because they make the sea level in our oceans rise. And this poses a severe threat to low-lying coastal lands in countries such as Bangladesh or the numerous island states that are located in the Pacific Ocean and in the Indian Ocean, and that does not extend very high above the sea level. So natural scientists often say that what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic, that we are all connected by the impacts of climate change. It's not only glaciers that melt in this region, but also sea ice. The extent of the Arctic Ocean sea ice has been decreasing for decades. So this graph shows the changes that has happened since 1978 until the present. There has been variations over the years, but the trend is clear. The sea ice extent is decreasing. The Arctic sea ice is also getting younger and thinner. The amount of multi-year ice is decreasing, which means that the process of melting this ice increases. And climate scientists today predict that there will be no Arctic Ocean sea ice in the summertime in the coming few decades. Climate change is also having other impacts in the Arctic region, and one of them is coastal erosion, which is increasing because of increased wave activity along the coastlines in the absence of sea ice and the formation of open water bodies for longer periods of time during the year. And coastal erosion also happens because the permafrost in the ground is thawing due to rising temperatures. And the thawing permafrost is also a global problem, because when the permafrost on the vast Arctic tundras thaw, they release methane gas, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and there is a lot of methane out there. The thawing permafrost also has effects for people who are living in the Arctic. Buildings built on permafrost that thaws starts to move and eventually collapses. Buildings built along eroding coastlines are destroyed, and so are the archaeological remains that are located along Arctic coastlines that are subject to erosion. Thawing permafrost also bring damage to roads in the Arctic, roads that are needed for economic activities, both local but also large-scale industrial activities. And the warming climate also affects livelihoods of local communities in the north. One example is Sami reindeer herding. With the warmer temperatures, we often get days with rainfall in the middle of the winter. It's really awkward, but it causes the snow cover to melt, and the snow cover becomes wet. Then, when the Arctic cold returns again, the wet snow freezes into ice, and it creates an ice crust. And because of this ice crust, the reindeers cannot smell where lichens are, and when they do smell where the lichens are, they have a hard time to get to it because of the ice crust. The warming climate also makes it more dangerous to travel across lakes and rivers, passages that have been used by local people in the north for decades in the past in a safe manner. Climate change is not the only thing, though. Big changes are also of a social nature, economic and political. So the Arctic is melting in terms of sea ice, and the melting sea ice make it possible to conduct transcontinental shipping between the Pacific Ocean and between the Atlantic. And there are many opportunities embedded in this, because the route across the Arctic Ocean is 40% shorter than if you use the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal. And there are two main routes, the Northern Sea route along the north coast of Asia and the Northwest Passage along the coast of North America. There's also challenges, of course, with this. There are ice hazards, there's a lack of infrastructure, there are environmental risks, and there are legal and political disputes that make shipping more difficult, and indeed high operational costs because of high insurance rates and need for ice-class vessels. But indeed, shipping is increasing in the region. So is natural interests in mineral resources. There's a rapidly growing demand for mineral resources that has been increasing since the early 2000s. It's a part of a global mining boom, but it's affecting the Arctic because the Arctic is rich in minerals. And it's about base metals such as iron and copper, but also rare and strategic metals such as lithium or rare earth elements. And there are many mining projects that are expanding, ongoing mining that is expanding, like here in Kiruna, but also new mining projects. Some examples, like the iron ore mines of Vermont that has been in operation since the 1970s in Quebec in Canada, with rapidly increasing amounts of iron ore taken out in that part of the subarctic. Some of you will go to the TICCIH copper mine in Norrbotten. Copper prices are very high, used in electrification. And these operations of Boliden in TICCIH are also increasingly substantial. But there are also new mining projects, like the Viscaria copper mine being in the process of being opened here in Kiruna. Rare earth elements, also in Kiruna, in the Geijer ore body, located behind the mountain of Luossavaara. You may have seen this board yesterday if you visited the LKAB mine. Rare earth elements are also present in places like Greenland, in southern Greenland, in Narsak. There the rare earth elements are embedded in an ore body that also contains a lot of uranium. And also uranium mining might be on the horizon. The Swedish government is talking about reopening the nuclear power program and also opening the possibilities to extract uranium in Sweden. And parts of the uranium deposits are located in the Arctic. This is from Pleutajokk outside of Arjeplog in Norrbotten, where activities apparently are ongoing, as we can read from this sign. There's also other forms of energy resources than uranium available in the Arctic. This map is quite famous. It's from 2008, released by the US Geological Survey after the sea ice minimum that took place the year before in 2007, which shows that about 25% of the yet untapped oil and gas resources in the world are located in the Arctic Ocean region, some on land, some in the sea. But there's also other energy forms like hydropower stations, which in Sweden are heavily present in the northern parts of the country, but also in Iceland and projects in the making in Greenland, partly for aluminum production and other productions that require a lot of electricity. New wind power farms are built up in the north, apparently with the perception that there is an unlimited amount of land available for wind power development, because after all, there's no people up here, right? So this growing demand for renewable energy for green industries is likely to drive the establishment of new wind power farms in the future. And all of this is kind of also part of a big booming in interest in green transition industries that are taking place in many parts of the world, but in Europe it's focusing on the northern parts of Sweden and Finland and Norway. And there's a lot of future visioning going on here. Industrial adventure in northern Sweden, investments for over 1,000 billion Swedish kronor, says Peter Karlsson, who was a government-appointed investigator on this development. Magdalena Andersson, who is the leader of the Social Democratic Party, called it a new industrial revolution. And so this goes on. This narrative is present in everyday media and political debate in Sweden. And a part of it is indeed connected with the iron and steel industry. Industrial heritage people usually like the iron and steel industry and its history. Well, there's new technologies for low CO2 emission or even zero CO2 emission production of steel here. And those of you who visited the LKAB will have heard a lot about it yesterday. Historically, the Swedish steel industry has been based on charcoal from the Iron Age up until the early 1900s, and thereafter on coke, like everywhere else in Western Europe from the early 20th century. And Coke-based steel making is calculated to account for up to 25% of the CO2 emissions in Europe. And the steelworks, one of the big steelworks that we have in Sweden with blast furnaces in Luleå, emits up to 10% of the entire CO2 emissions in the country. So there's a lot to gain there by modernizing this production chain. And that is what is happening in places like Boden. Some of you went with a pre-Congress tour together with Roine Wiklund, and you will have seen this site of Stegra. It's located in the city of Boden and connected to the iron ore railway, bringing in the possibility to use iron ore from Malmberget and from Kiruna. That has yet to happen, of course. Hybrid is another of these big industrial projects as a result of a collaboration between some of the big industrial companies in mining, energy, and steel in Sweden. It's located in Luleå, a test facility, and which is upscaled currently in Gällivare. And this is a production process using iron ore and that is smelted by hydrogen gas and producing iron sponge, and thereafter then the following stages using electric arc furnaces. And there are many challenges with this production, of course, because it needs a lot of electricity. The production of hydrogen gas requires a lot. And the Hybrid and the Stegra facilities, they will need more electricity per year than is produced of all the hydropower stations in the Luleå River, which is 15 hydropower stations annually to produce the hydrogen gas just for the steel production. So we likely will see some more energy development also. Other parts of the green industries, of course, car batteries, battery anodes, fertilizers, rare earth element extraction from waste rock, and all of them are placed in new production facilities that are located in Luleå and in the Skellefteå harbor. So the industrialization is taking place across this entire region, from coast to coast, basically, if we count in Norway. And the visioning around this is, you can see in these images, Northvolt had some economic problems. We don't know really what will happen there with that factory. And the lower image is a vision of what the Luleå harbor area will look like when all of these green industries are there in place. It does not look like that. It looks like this right now, which is somewhat different, but who knows? Another branch of activity that is happening here in Kiruna, but also in other places of the Fennoscandian Arctic, is related to space. And that's both companies involved in space-related industry, but also research and also the military. So you have the S-range, rocket range outside of Kiruna here. You have research facilities such as ASCAT, also located outside of Kiruna and connected to other sites in Svalbard and elsewhere. And the Institute for Space Physics and the LTU Space Campus located outside of Kiruna. Established back in the Cold War years, partly for the purpose of looking at what the Soviets did in the Arctic region, because from space you can look at many things on Earth, and one of these things are, of course, military activities in an area that is very sparsely populated and where information about what the others are doing is also very attractive. Which brings me over to geopolitics and security, which is yet another challenge here in the Arctic. The Arctic has been of strategic importance for centuries. It has been heavily militarized as a result of war and tensions in other parts of the world during the First World War, the Second World War, during the Cold War. But the strategic significance of the Arctic is rising currently because of the tensions arising from Russia's war in Ukraine and also challenges to the role of Arctic states in the governing of the Arctic from non-Arctic states. And of course, Sweden's and Finland's entry into the NATO and new US policies towards other states in the Arctic Council. I mentioned Canada, I mentioned Greenland, and you know what I will be talking about. So this has led to a militarization and a strengthening of the total defense in the Arctic that affects all aspects of this region. So these processes of change in the Arctic is bringing tensions, and they are geopolitical tensions, the right to influence the future of the Arctic region and to govern it. But I will focus more on land use tensions, resource industries and local actors that have different interpretations of what the proper way to use the land is. And it's also tensions between resource industries and also between residents who have different or opposing visions about the future. And those tensions, they are related to narratives about the past and historical remains that are becoming features in these conflicts. So I will present two cases that we have done research on the role of industrial heritage in competing visions about the future. One is called Laver, and it's a mining town located here in Norrbotten. And the other one is called a mining project called Hannukainen, which is located in Kolari in Finnish Lapland, across the border between Sweden and Finland. And the aim of this research has been to nuance the understanding of industrial heritage as a generator of altruistic societal values. And the questions we have posed is: how do competing actors in conflicts regarding the future construct heritage and narratives about the history, and why, and what are the outcomes of such practices? So I will begin with Laver. The Laver area has been inhabited for thousands of years, since the inland ice retreated, basically. And the moorlands in this area is very rich with lichens, and for this reason it has also been a good grazing land for Sami reindeer herders, people who are now organized in the Semisjaur-Njarg Sami reindeer herding community. But also for small-scale farming and for forestry. So it's a landscape with historical remains of such activities, and some are protected as cultural heritage today. The Laver area has also been the subject of industrialization in the 20th century, beginning with large-scale forest industry, but in the 1930s with the establishment of a mining settlement. And it was the Swedish mining company Boliden that established this mining town in 1936. They started up a copper mine and built a production facility with ore crushers and concentrators, tailing ponds and all of that, and a settlement made for about 250 inhabitants. It was a model town with comparably high living standards and social services, but it was eventually closed in 1946 because of an unfavorable ore body at that time, and also falling copper prices. Without the mine, Boliden had no intention to maintain this settlement at Laver, and the inhabitants needed to find other jobs, and the company dismantled all buildings and moved some of them to new locations. And by May 1947, Boliden had finished this process. And up until today, the remains from mining at Laver and from this municipality have lingered on. There's foundations from buildings and production facilities, as well as waste. Boliden extracted some 1,573 million tons of copper ore and generated waste and rock piles, as well as a tailing dam that contain 1.2 million tons of tailings that are located in a valley south of the former mining area, an area that covers about 12 hectares. The tailing impoundment contains several toxic materials, and these, as well as the former settlement, slowly fell out of attention in the years that followed the closure of Laver. And then the forces of nature intervened. In 1951 and 1952, the wall of the impoundment eroded away, and as much as a quarter of the tailings floated out into the nearby river water system. It took about 20 years, then there were some attempts made to deal with the toxic waste. And since the 1970s and onwards, Boliden have launched different sorts of programs to try to deal with this toxic waste to stop the leaking of heavy metals like cadmium, copper, sulfur, and zinc into the surrounding environment. But Laver has also been the subject for heritageization. With the growing interest for industrial heritage that took place and grew and expanded during the 2000s, the Norrbotten County Museum, on a mission from the County Administrative Board, placed different signboards in Laver and with photographs and narratives guiding the visitor to understand what kind of place that this was in the past. The Laver is not only a thing of the past, however, it's also a part of the future. There is a plan for a new mining operation at Laver. The company Boliden applied for a concession for this new mine back in 2014, and this has ended up in a complex process of environmental permission giving process. So all the permissions are not in place just yet, but in very far in the process they are. And the project that they applied for was on a completely different scale than previous mines. And the new mine will be about 46 square kilometers large, including a very high tailing dam. Just how high it is, we don't really know. The plans are changing there. But this has, of course, generated somewhat of a controversy. There are actors in favor of this mine, naturally the mining company, but also municipality politicians and local residents in the municipality of Älvsbyn. But there's also people opposing it. Also municipality residents and different environmentalist organizations that are active in this area, and indeed the Semisjaur Njarg Sami reindeer herding community. And this is a conflict in which the competing actors have used the history and heritage of Laver. Well, this is just to show the differences in sites, but let's move on. So people who are in support of the new mine, then they tend to talk about Laver in narratives that are giving positive values to both the past and to the remains from the past. They are speaking about narratives about a model society of old Laver as a promise of a new prosperity that will come back and renew the dream of Laver in present-day Älvsbyn. The new Laver as a reawakening of the old, a recognition of past efforts and to create prosperity. They are also talking about it in narratives about preserving nature, because the new Laver will be in the footprint of the old mine, they say, and that therefore avoiding to do mining in pristine environments in other places. The new Laver is also a hope for removing the toxic waste from the old mining operations. And when proponents of the new mine take visitors to the sites, they take them to the industrial heritage located by the old town of Laver, the model town, and focus on the remains of the settlement. Actors who are opposing the mine, they have different narratives. They say the industrial remains at Laver represent a recent history and the mining activities as a destroyer of, for instance, grazing lands for indigenous reindeer herding. It is a story that represents a history about toxic waste and about environmental damage. It's a history of environmental risks. And they also arrange a number of site visits, but not to the old settlement, but to the toxic waste areas downstream. The case of Hannukainen then has some similarities. The Kolari municipality, where this is located, is in the Swedish-Finnish cross-border region by Torne River Valley. The iron ore extraction here began in 1662 and continued periodically in the 17th century. And then in the second half of the 20th century, more deposits of iron ore were discovered there, bringing a new mining area to this part of Finnish Lapland. Now, the most notable was the ironworks and the underground mine of Rautovaara, as well as a concentrator plant for the nearby Hannukainen open pit mine, which was in operation between 1978 and 1990. And both of these mines were operated by a state-led company called Rautaruukki Oy. The mining operations had considerable local economic, social, and environmental impacts in Kolari. It gave 250 well-paid jobs in a very sparsely populated place, infrastructure in the form of a wide road and a railway, the first railway to northernmost Finland, electric streetlights. And it was considered by locals at the time as a time of prosperity, especially for the municipal center of Kolari. But by 1990, both the mines were closed due to poor profitability. The southern part of Kolari took the hardest hit from the closure of the mine and was left with nothing to replace the loss of incomes from the industry. In the northern part of the municipality, however, where the mine had been in operation, there was a new business taking over and expanding, namely the tourism industry. And the Arctic resource boom that started off in the early 2000s that brought new mining projects into the region. In 2005, a company called Northland Resources began the mine development. This company went into bankruptcy in 2014. But from 2015, a new mining company called Hannukainen Oy took over. And they also have a new mining project, which, just like in the case of Laver, is on a much more massive scale than the old one. 200 hectares instead of 21 hectares in the old mine. And there are different narratives about this mine also, and about the heritage and the legacies of the previous mining operation. The opponents of the mine say that, bring up stories about the disruption of reindeer herding of the old mine, and also contamination of the environment. And they also bring up the history of tourism in the northern Kolari region, tourism that will not benefit from mining, they say. The proponents of the mine, on the other hand, they bring up narratives about Kolari as an old mining community. That's our blood. That's in our genes. We are a mining community, and they bring up the employment opportunity and prosperity that was once brought by the old mine, and the local connection of the owners of the new mining company, people from the municipality, that will ensure the respect for local communities. And again, the story about the new mine taking place in the footprint of the old. So the industrial heritage, in a way, opens up a legitimate road for a new mine. Right, so some conclusions from this. Well, we think that it's clear that history and heritage plays an important role in the competing future visions that are currently taking the scene in the Arctic. Competing actors are building historical narratives to support their visions about what a proper future for the region is. And they make the material remains of past industrial operations into anchor points for those histories. And they are involved in processes of heritageization for this purpose. In land use conflicts, the actors who are in favor of new mines focus on aspects of local mining history with positive connotations, lost utopias, providers of jobs, welfare and good relations with local people, including indigenous people. And histories of environmental impacts that are contrasted with present-day high standards in the mining industry. Reopen mines as protection of pristine environments and opportunities to clean historic waste. This is a form of corporate heritage making in support of company ambitions in the present, and the necessity for companies to get social license to operate. In land use conflicts, actors who are critical of the new mines tend to focus their stories on previous impacts on the environment and local communities, and they mobilize histories and events that are usable as arguments for caution, toxic waste, physical barriers, landscape change. And that brings up the thought that, well, does this mean that history and heritage can, in this way, help to deepen the conflicts about the future mining operations in the Arctic? Because the different narratives about the past and the future are seemingly irreconcilable. Do they strengthen the already growing tensions regarding the history of this region and feed conflicts rather than helping to solve them? This is a really important issue, I think, for industrial heritage scholars and practitioners in the industrial heritage field to think about. How can we contribute to making industrial heritage support a responsible development in these times of change? And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Dag, for a very inspirational keynote. We have a small gift for you. You can open it later and show me what it is. I think we will open up the floor for a few questions. Anyone, just raise your hands and we will give you the mic.
Yes. You mentioned in some of the slides the tourism activities related with this heritage, industrial heritage. And my question is exactly about how tourism is seen in these kind of narratives, because we know that it can be seen as a positive, having a positive impact and promoting local heritage and as a sustainable industry. But at the same time, we know that tourism is also an extractive industry in a way, and especially in the form of mass tourism, can have huge impacts in delicate ecosystems like in the Arctic that you show. So how this discussion enters in these narratives?
Thank you, Andrea, for a very good question. Tourism is indeed a prominent feature in many deindustrialized mining communities in the Arctic. For instance, Spitsbergen or Svalbard is a classical example of that, where closed mining operations have ended up giving a risky situation to communities, but where the economy is again thriving because of repurposing the industrial buildings for tourism purposes and heritageization, which brings people interested in tourism to go to these places. But there's a big difference between different mining sites. Some are located very far away from other areas where tourists go to. Here in Kiruna, it's easy because you get a lot of hiking tourism to the mountains and people who are here for many different reasons. And as a part of a larger trip, they will go and visit the LKAB mines and the industrial heritage sites around. But in places like Laver and in Hannukainen, you don't get a lot of tourists going there. So it's much more challenging to actually make heritage tourism into something that can provide some more sustainable economic development there. So I think it's important here to pay attention to the big differences between sites, really.
Hi. We've seen a lot in the past few days about the conflicts and the Sami community and the need for a future, in mining. Do you see a way forward, like how can these two be, coexist? Is that a possibility, or is it always a question of who do we, favor?
I think that's the key question, right? So I think it is possible to coexist, but there's a lot that needs to be done to lessen the conflicts between extractive industries and traditional land uses, for instance. And very much about that is in the process of negotiating and planning for these projects. People who are affected by mining needs to be brought in much earlier and needs to be to have more influence over how mining operations are designed. That's one part of the story. But when it comes to how do we tell the proper narratives about these about industrial heritage and the industrial history. How can we overcome competing narratives like the ones I spoke about? I think that is also possible by just accepting the fact that there will never be one narrative about these places. But when you narrate these places using publications, different web platforms, or visitors' guides, or signboards at these places, you have to make room for these different narratives and make these sites relevant for anyone who goes there. So if you're going there and you want to know about the past because you really think mining is super important for the future, well, you will get your experience, a valuable experience there, and be able to also to test your thoughts. But it should be this in the same way for people who are against or are critical of mining operations. They would be able also to find information that they can learn from. And most importantly, for people who have different opinions, to get a possibility to test their thoughts and to reflect upon these sites. So we should get away from one-sided narratives of these places and just allow for competing narratives.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dag, for the very interesting presentation. I would like to ask you about not only the framing, but maybe what you find there, which is in this very short presentation a kind of a vice versa and dichotomy of opposing and pros and contras. And this is, of course, something which strengthens a conflict, because there has a clear opposition. And I learned in many case studies which are not comparable with the Arctic heritage, that there are lots of differentiating positions, and we have a complex pictures of actors and narratives and arguments, and with this more complex picture, it's also easier to build bridges. And is it the case in the two case studies you presented that it's so clear already this vice versa situation between the actors involved and engaged in the conflict? Or is there space for some other positions?
I mean, it was a long time ago since these mines were in operation. So, but when I think it's a very good point, because in any northern community that has a controversy over mining and has different approaches to future extractive industries in the neighborhood, it's never black and white. In most families, in most municipalities, in most larger families, you will have people who will both suffer consequences or problems due to new industrial projects, but also people who will work in those projects and will need incomes from them. So you have very seldom this clear-cut pro and against mining, and of course that is quite possible to also dig out when you look at the histories of these places. So I think that you are quite right that finding this less dichotomized narrative about pro or against is really important when framing the history of these industrial heritage sites and discussing the future.
Thank you so very much. Give him a round of applause again. Thank you, Dag.